When he was young, and that's me, you know.
Tell us about your dad when he was young.
My dad back then and younger, he was a hot rodder, and he's a painter. He's a guy that rode horses bareback and stuff, you know, because it was Oklahoma and it was very primitive. But then he went to college. He minored in college.
We never talked that much about the hot rodding part of your dad.
Yeah, well, I think it was just back then, cars were pretty new in a way, you know. I mean, in the 40s or 30s, you're just like, there'd only been 30 or 40 years of cars at that point. And I guess, you know, they just did stuff. He just changed cars all the time. Every week he had a different car because he would trade. And so, but he really liked his, I guess it was like a 58 Pontiac, a red and white one. But, you know, him and his friends sawed a roof off a car one time. But I remember going to drag races and stuff with them.
You did drag races?
Yeah, but really primitive. I mean, no dragsters. It's just guys in their cars, you know. I don't know, was it sanctioned or was it just in some back road? I'm not sure where it was, you know.
Wait, what do you mean they sawed the roofs
He
off?
said they just got a blowtorch and cut the roof off a car to make a hot rod. This was, you know, in Oklahoma in, I don't know.
50s?
Late 30s, early 40s. Yeah.
God.
Yeah, I'm in the 50s, so he's 24 years older than me. So he was a kid. He was 24 when I was born.
I didn't know they did that.
But I think it seemed like Gasoline Alley. That's about people working on their own cars.
Yeah.
So since the early days of cars, people were fooling. They had to fool around with them at first, and then they kept fooling around with them. And then young people saw, like, you know, their older brothers were fooling around with them, so they all started chopping them and channeling them and raking them and pouring on the lead and stuff.
So he was a painter?
He still is. This is one of his paintings.
Oh, wow.
And this painting was one he gave to my daughter Olive, and it was it's how she got her middle name Sienna. It was because we wanted to name her middle name for the initial for her grandmother Shirley, who had passed away, but we didn't want to call her Shirley. And so we asked my father, like, if he had an idea, and he was painting this painting, and he called me in the middle of the night, Gary, Olive and Sienna. So that's the story.
Did your dad's hot riding inform the drawing and painting you were doing as subjects?
Oh, I think his youth, that he's a painter, influenced me completely. But that he was really young was another kind of input, because then you're being raised by, you know, a really young, immature person, you know. I mean,
How old was he when he had you?
He was 24, I think. And so I think one thing that he came home once with a knife through his foot, because he'd been playing mumbly peg with some guys and got a knife thrown through his shoe, through his foot.
What's mumbly peg, Gary?
It's when you, like, try to throw a knife close to your foot, and if you're chicken, you move your foot. But he wasn't chicken, and someone thought he would chicken out. Who could throw a knife really good? I don't know. It's like I keep saying over and over in all of these interviews, my childhood, it seemed really boring, like nothing was happening. But then if you start taking it apart, it's just like a backwoods wonderland, you know. Weird stories and stuff.
And what about the Mexican stuff?
Yeah, that's about Mexico, definitely.
Yeah.
And a lot of my work's about that experience near Mexico, on the border of Texas in the 50s.
What did you see there?
I saw bright colors. I saw exotic plants and animals and a different kind of spirit. Like when we moved to East Texas, then it was really safe and boring. But in Brownsville was dangerous and not boring and colorful, you know. And when we went to Matamoros, kids would just break into your car and, like, take everything out of your car. You would come back and there'd be like 10 kids in your car, you know, like trying to take the seats out or something. You know? It was like desperate and crazy and weird. And yet the folk art of Mexico, like, you'd go to these bazaars and there'd be all of those, like, Donald and Mickey puppets and pull toys and things all made out of wood, you know, with some, like, super simple mechanism that did some kind of neat thing. So I don't know, all of it. I'm a visual person. It made it.
So you were born in Texas, not Oklahoma?
I was born in Oklahoma, but then grew up mostly in Texas. Yeah, in Durant, Oklahoma, yeah.
And when you were a young man after college and in LA, I mean, with your dad being... Did you ever kind of, I mean, every young man kind of thinks about or wants to, or subconsciously in some ways is kind of reacting to their father when they're in their 20s or something. When you got to LA as like, and did you ever think of yourself as like a kind of like a like a arty cowboy version of your dad? Did you ever?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't mind that. That's kind of, I even had fantasies about, assuming a persona,
Really?
like, oh, I'll grow a little mustache and get a leather-tooled briefcase and pretend I'm really a Texan, like some kind of fantasy Texan. I don't know. It's great. Like identity. I think my father was, it's just like always being on the shrinks counts just as soon as I go into this.
Right.
But, no, I love my father. He's a big influence on me, but there's like disappointments on both sides just in that I didn't stick with his religion. And so that made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And it makes him kind of afraid to look at my work because he's afraid he's going to see things in there he won't like. And so I don't offer to show it to him much. But luckily we have his work to look at, and I'm really happy to do that because I'd much rather look at his cool paintings of cowboys and Indians than talk about Jesus. That always leads to recrimination and conflict. But